I'm giving you 3 seconds to let go of the door before I detain you. My sister said that. Calmly. Without flinching. While a 48-year-old woman named Karen Whitmore screamed in her face and yanked on her car door like she was trying to evict Satan from a sedan. Karen didn't know 2 things in that moment. 1. My sister had just come back from a 3-month-long undercover op tracking arms smugglers across state lines. And 2. She was holding back an entire hurricane of federal authority behind that raised eyebrow. And me? I was across the street, mouth open, holding a grocery bag full of avocados and frozen pizza, wondering if I should start filming or start praying. Let me rewind just a bit. This all started 2 weeks ago when my sister, Jade Monroe, moved into my neighborhood. She needed a break from work, burnout, she said. Just a couple months low profile, she added, tossing her go bag onto the hardwood floor of my guest room like she hadn't just returned from God knows where. I didn't ask questions. You don't ask questions when your sister carries 2 passports and has a drawer full of burner phones labeled by state. You just give her the Wi-Fi password and pray the neighbors don't ask why she checks all exits before sitting down to eat. Now, I live in East Haven Springs, a place so aggressively suburban it should come with a complimentary golden retriever. It's all trimmed hedges, vinyl fences, and HOA meetings about mailbox heights. And patrolling all of it like some caffeine-fueled suburban sheriff is Karen Whitmore. Karen is the type of woman who prints out screenshots from the neighborhood Facebook group and keeps them in a binder. A real binder. I once saw her yell at a squirrel for knocking over her Halloween pumpkin. That kind of energy. When Karen saw Jade for the first time, something in her snapped. Jade doesn't fit into Karen's spreadsheet of acceptable suburban behavior. She has tattoos. She drives a blacked-out Dodge Charger that purrs like a dragon. She wears sunglasses at night and doesn't make eye contact at bake sales. Worst of all, she parks on the street. In front of her own house. But that curb, as Karen will probably remind anyone with ears, is technically common property, which means she sees it as hers. It didn't take long for Karen to make a move. I was inside folding laundry when I heard it, shouting. Not normal shouting. Karen shouting, which has the pitch of a kettle and the fury of a toddler denied an iPad. I ran outside just in time to see her leaning halfway into Jade's car window, jabbing a finger into the air and yelling about something to do with community standards and vehicular entitlement. Jade was seated in the driver's seat, unbothered, sipping an iced coffee and scrolling on her phone like this sort of thing happened every Tuesday. Which, to be fair, it might. Then Karen did it. She reached for the door handle. Jade locked the door. Karen yanked anyway. I dropped the pizza. Jade looked at her and said the sentence that would later go viral across 7 social media platforms. You have 3 seconds to let go before I detain you. Karen laughed. A full, throaty, condescending laugh. She said, and I quote, "Detain me? Are you serious? What are you, some kind of mall cop?" Jade stepped out of the car. Now, I should clarify something. My sister is not built like your average federal agent. She's 5'6", lean, and calm in that unnerving way where her stillness feels like the eye of a hurricane. She looks more like a yoga instructor than someone trained to disarm a hostile subject with a paperclip and a rolled-up magazine. So when she stepped out, Karen just stood there, hands still on the door, looking smug. Then Jade reached into her back pocket, pulled out a small black wallet, and flipped it open. U.S. Marshal's badge. I swear the air temperature dropped 10 degrees. Karen blinked. You could see her brain short-circuiting. This wasn't on her bingo card. She let go of the door slowly, like it was hot to the touch. You're serious?" she stammered. Jade, without breaking eye contact, pulled a small zip tie from her jacket pocket. "Turn around, ma'am!" Karen shrieked. It was a full-on neighborhood spectacle in seconds. Mrs. Donnelly peeked through her blinds. Mr. Huang across the street opened his garage and pretended to check his recycling. A kid on a scooter stopped mid-ride and just stared. Karen flailed and shrieked about rights and lawsuits and deep state setups. but Jade had her zip tied and seated on the lawn within 20 seconds. It was like watching someone fold a fitted sheet, graceful, efficient, and absolutely sorcery. Then Jade said, "You have the right to remain silent. I recommend using it." That line should have won an Emmy. By the time local PD arrived, Karen was weeping on her front yard, mascara running, screaming something about Facebook moderators conspiring against her. Jade calmly showed her badge, gave a statement, and walked back inside like she'd just taken out the trash. No fuss, no drama, just another Tuesday. Later that night, the footage from a neighbor's Ring camera hit social media. It took 4 hours to hit 1 million views. By morning, Suburban Karen vs. U.S. Marshal was trending globally. There were remixes. One had dubstep. Another turned Karen's screeches into a dramatic opera. Jade, of course, remained unbothered. She drank her coffee, stretched in the backyard, and muttered, "She had it coming." But that moment, that exact moment, was only the beginning. Because if there's one thing Karen Whitmore doesn't do, it's admit defeat. No, she wasn't done. Not even close. And the next time she came for my sister, she didn't come alone. Karen Whitmore was not going to let it go. Normal people might have taken the loss, done some self-reflection, maybe baked some cookies and moved on. But not Karen. The humiliation festered like an unwatered fern in her soul. She had gone viral not for her activism, not for her award-winning Halloween decor, but for getting zip-tied on her own lawn by a woman she called a mall cop. The internet was merciless. Memes exploded. Someone made a t-shirt that said, "You have 3 seconds to let go before I detain you," with a cartoon Karen flailing beneath it. Another person posted a mashup of her screaming sync to dubstep with the title, "Federal Funk Down." It was downloaded over 6 million times. By the third day, Karen had locked her social media, called the local news to set the record straight, and then, when they aired it with laugh tracks edited in, called her lawyer. It was war now. Karen saw herself as a crusader for suburban justice, a lone beacon of morality in a cul-de-sac tainted by outsiders and government infiltration. In her mind, Jade wasn't a hero, or even an officer. She was a threat to order. Karen began documenting everything. Every time Jade went out, came home, got a delivery, anything, Karen took notes like she was preparing a thesis. She even bought binoculars. Real, military-grade ones. She would sit on her porch, sipping decaf with a notepad, tracking Jade's movements like a budget version of the CIA. My personal favorite moment was when she attempted to follow Jade in her Subaru and got caught behind a school bus for 15 minutes while Jade casually lost her around a roundabout. But Karen didn't stop at stalking. She went full scorched earth. She marched to the HOA office with a manila folder full of printed screenshots, photographs, and half-baked accusations. She claimed Jade was violating parking codes, trash bin regulations, noise ordinances, and at one point, this is not a joke, radiating bad vibes into the neighborhood ecosystem. The HOA chair, Mr. Reynolds, politely asked her to leave. She called him a deep state puppet. Then Karen went legal. She filed a civil complaint accusing Jade of assault, impersonating an officer, and causing irreversible social humiliation. The paperwork was filled with grammatical errors and included screenshots of memes as evidence. Her lawyer, who also ran a vape shop downtown, tried to send Jade a cease and desist letter written in Comic Sans. Jade, unfazed, scanned it, chuckled, and used it as a coaster. What Karen didn't know was that she'd accidentally poked a very real and very dangerous bear. Because in her crusade to destroy Jade, she hired someone. Enter Lenny, Lowlight Ferris. A private investigator with a Yelp rating of 2.3 stars and a mustache that looked like it had been glued on in the dark. Lenny was cheap, shady, and desperate. Which made him exactly the wrong person for Karen to hand a check to. Lenny started following Jade. He wasn't subtle about it. Jade spotted him on day 2. She clocked the rented Corolla with a missing hubcap 3 blocks away and said, "You think that guy's with Karen?" I looked over and saw Lenny struggling to hold a camera with one hand and eat a burrito with the other. Jade didn't even bother confronting him. She just smiled and waved every time she passed him. It drove him nuts. But Lenny, in his bumbling persistence, stumbled onto something. He dug into Jade's background. He hit a few walls, sure. Her file was classified, redacted in all the right places, but he managed to catch wind of a detail. Jade had been put on administrative leave. Officially. That little nugget was all Karen needed to blow everything out of proportion. She marched around with printouts of obscure federal documents she barely understood, declaring she had exposed Jade for what she really was, a fraud, a rogue, a deep state experiment gone wrong. The reality was far more complicated. Jade had been on leave, yes. But not for the reasons Karen thought. She wasn't under investigation, she was recovering from an op that had gone sideways. One of their informants had disappeared mid-mission. A guy named Santiago Vega. He'd been deep inside a gun-running operation operating in 3 states, and right before Jade could extract him, he ghosted. No warning, no signal, no trace. And now, as Karen and Lenny fumbled through parking complaints and conspiracy theories, the name Santiago popped up again. Right here. In East Haven Springs. Jade was the first to notice. She saw a familiar car parked down the block. Same model. Same paint scratch across the fender. But the license plate was different. Still, her instincts flared. She called a contact at the bureau and within hours, confirmation came through. The vehicle was tied to a dummy address used by Vega during his infiltration. The signal they'd lost months ago had reappeared. Here. In our neighborhood. That's when everything shifted. Jade was pulled back in. Her superiors were skeptical, but intrigued. It was too convenient, too coincidental. They gave her temporary clearance to investigate discreetly. She didn't tell me at first. I noticed a shift in her demeanor. She went quiet, sharp-eyed, started checking her car twice before driving. She started wearing her badge under her hoodie again. Meanwhile, Karen thought she was winning. She was convinced her harassment campaign was breaking Jade down. She started bragging that Jade had been recalled by the deep state for reprogramming. She organized a meeting at the community clubhouse with a printed-out PowerPoint presentation about federal overreach and psychological warfare through vehicle noise. Only 2 people showed up, and one of them was just looking for the restroom. But in the shadows of Karen's drama, something very real was brewing. Lenny's investigation turned from petty to dangerous. He had unknowingly brushed up against something larger. One of the photos he took, while trying to catch Jade stealing Wi-Fi from a neighbor, accidentally captured a known associate of Santiago Vega unloading equipment from a landscaping truck. Jade saw the photo. Froze. Then moved. Karen, ever the chaotic force of the neighborhood, had unwittingly stumbled upon an actual criminal ring. The landscaping crew, operating under the name Green Horizons, had been moving more than mulch. Jade connected the dots fast, laundered money, coded communication through service invoices, encrypted drop points disguised as gardening requests. All of it happening right under Karen's nose, which, to be fair, was constantly pressed against a pair of binoculars. By the end of that week, Jade was no longer just here to rest. She was back in full operational mode. And as she pieced together the details, one chilling fact emerged. Karen might have been annoying, obsessive, even dangerous in her own way, but her bumbling, over-the-top attempts at revenge had shaken a few loose threads that led to something real. Something serious. The irony? Karen still thought she was in control. Still thought she was going to expose Jade. Still thought she was the hero of her own HOE drama. But she had no idea that in the process of waging her little suburban war, she just lit a match near a powder keg. And it was about to blow. At exactly 3:42 a.m., Jade stood barefoot in our kitchen, staring at a corkboard covered in printouts, maps, and scribbled notes, with a spoonful of peanut butter halfway to her mouth. Her eyes were locked on a blurry still frame from the photo Lenny Ferris had taken, the one with the landscaping truck in the background. The man in question, mid-lift with a tarp-wrapped bundle of who knows what, had a distinct scar running across his left eyebrow. Jade knew that scar. She'd seen it in a classified file years ago. His name was Leon Ortiz, and he wasn't just a landscaper, he was an ex-mercenary turned courier for multiple criminal enterprises. Arms, drugs, smuggling, you name it. And somehow, he was doing yard work 3 houses down from ours every other Wednesday. She didn't say anything at first. She just circled his face with a red marker, added a sticky note that read, "Santiago Connection?" and finally sat down with a quiet, bitter laugh. Karen may have stumbled into something bigger than her HOA parking crusade, she muttered. Which means I'm back on duty, officially. By 8 a.m., Jade had made 2 encrypted calls, packed her gear bag, and taken off in the Charger like she was chasing ghosts. I didn't know everything, she kept me mostly in the dark for safety reasons, but she left me with one instruction: if you see the Green Horizons truck, text me. Nothing else. Just a photo and a location. I nodded and pretended not to panic. Because even with all her calm, Jade didn't look like someone easing back into work. She looked like someone heading into war. What made it more surreal was how normal the neighborhood looked. Kids rode scooters. Sprinklers ticked away like nothing was wrong. Karen, of course, was still stomping around like the queen of delusion, proudly announcing to anyone who would listen that she had forced the feds to relocate their plant. She genuinely believed Jade had been reassigned thanks to her persistence. She even made laminated flyers with bold letters that read, "Never doubt the truth," and passed them out at the farmer's market. Meanwhile, she was being watched. Not just by Jade, but by people Jade hadn't even told me about yet. It wasn't long before Jade's instincts proved right. The landscaping crew returned. I spotted the same dented truck idling at the corner while 2 workers, Leon Ortiz among them, unloaded bags of mulch onto the curb. From a distance, it looked routine. But Jade had trained me to spot the small things. The overly cautious way Leon scanned the street. The fact that he wore gloves even when just lifting a plastic hose. The way one guy carried a shovel but never actually dug. I snapped a photo and sent it to her. She replied within 30 seconds. "Keep your distance. Do not engage. Eyes only." That night, Jade returned with a different energy. She barely spoke during dinner, only pausing to ask me for the Wi-Fi password again because she'd set up a network tap. "They're running drop points from the yards," she said. "The bags? Not mulch. Insulation foam lined with drug packets. They're using landscaping services as a front to make local deliveries and set up interstate shipments. This whole neighborhood is one big staging ground." The more Jade unraveled, the clearer it became. Santiago Vega hadn't gone missing. He'd gone rogue. Or worse, he'd embedded himself deeper into the network. Jade had failed to extract him during the last mission, but it wasn't because he ran. It was because he had switched sides. The next few days were a blur. Jade coordinated with a handful of agents under the radar. She couldn't go through official channels yet, it was too early, too risky, but she needed eyes and backup. 2 unmarked vans started showing up near the entrance of the subdivision. Jade rotated surveillance duty with a partner named Mendez, who disguised himself as a pest control tech. Meanwhile, Karen, oblivious to all of it, escalated her behavior. She installed a motion sensor in her front yard that blasted the national anthem if anyone came too close. She started putting up "Neighborhood under siege" signs. She accused the mailman of being part of a psychological operation. What pushed things over the edge was a mistaken delivery. One morning, a package meant for the landscaping crew was dropped at Karen's doorstep by accident. She opened it, obviously, because she believed in preventative neighborhood intelligence. Inside were 3 identical plastic garden frogs. Innocent looking, except Jade recognized them immediately. They were code. Carved into the bottom of each frog was a unique serial number, an encrypted location code for a drop site. Karen thought they were surveillance devices and decided, in her infinite wisdom, to storm down the street and confront the traitor mole. At 2:13 p.m., Karen, wearing a camouflage vest and wielding a garden rake like a weapon, charged into the yard of the house being used by the Green Horizons crew. She started screaming about foreign assets hiding in plain sight and suburban infiltration. Leon Ortiz, not one to enjoy attention, tried to de-escalate. Karen, in full lunatic glory, jabbed the rake in his direction. That's when everything exploded. A flash team had been on standby, and Jade was already halfway down the block when she got the alert. Within 90 seconds, the DA, Jade, and 2 backup units swarmed the property. Karen froze mid-rant as 5 men in tactical gear surrounded her and Leon. Jade tackled one of the runners trying to escape through the side gate. Another agent recovered a buried duffel bag filled with cell phones and bundles of cash in heat-sealed plastic. Karen, covered in dirt, holding a rake, and screaming about mind control fertilizer, was zip-tied for the second time in a month. The rest of the crew was apprehended without incident. Ortiz, surprisingly calm, said nothing. No resistance, no shouting, just a quiet, eerie nod as he was led into the van. The DA agents gave Jade a tight-lipped but impressed look. She'd cracked a multi-state operation that had gone unnoticed for over a year. And all of it was discovered because a suburban control freak couldn't handle someone parking in front of her house. Later that night, as the neighborhood returned to some version of normal, and the police lights faded from view, Jade sat on the porch with me, sipping a cold drink. I asked her if she was going back to DC now. She just smiled faintly and said, "Eventually. But not yet. There's still something off." I asked what she meant, and she said, "That landscaping truck? It's not the only one. And I think Vega's still out there. Watching." Across the street, Karen's house was dark. No porch light. No motion sensor anthem. Just silence. For the first time since she moved in, Karen had no words. But something told me, deep down, this wasn't the end. It wasn't even the climax. Something bigger was still coming. Jade knew it. And Vega, wherever he was waiting for the right moment to make his move. The courtroom smelled like old coffee, overused cologne, and suppressed rage. Karen Whitmore sat at the defendant's table, arms crossed, a stack of manila folders beside her, and a legal pad filled with her own handwriting in aggressive, all-caps print. She had insisted on representing herself, much to the visible exhaustion of the judge. Her glasses perched on the edge of her nose like a hawk preparing to dive. She wore a blazer that didn't fit and heels that clicked dramatically with every exaggerated movement. To her left was a USB stick she claimed contained undeniable proof of a federal cover-up. It was, in reality, a compilation of conspiracy TikToks and security cam footage of Jade mowing her lawn. Jade, by contrast, looked exactly like someone who had taken down an illegal smuggling operation while half the neighborhood watered begonias. Calm, poised, badge glinting ever so slightly under her jacket, she waited her turn without a flicker of emotion. The courtroom wasn't packed, but it felt full. Word had spread about the trial, mostly thanks to Karen's own efforts. She'd been handing out flyers at the community pool titled, "Karen vs. the Deep State, the Truth They Don't Want You to Hear." It had a photo of her zip-tied on the lawn, her face twisted in indignation, with the words, "Patriot or victim?" in Comic Sans beneath it. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Mathis, began the proceedings with the weariness of someone who'd already reviewed the case files and wondered if she could bill therapy to the state. Karen immediately launched into her opening statement, ignoring protocol and pacing in front of the courtroom like a rejected soap opera lawyer. She gestured wildly, pulled out laminated charts, and tried to play an audio file labeled "Mind Control Hum," which turned out to be her neighbor's air conditioner. She accused Jade of being a covert operative, a federal imposter, and, at one point, a psychological warfare agent sent to destabilize suburban unity. When it was Jade's turn, she stood, walked to the center, and stated her name, badge number, rank, and mission status with the kind of crisp authority that sucked the oxygen out of the room. She described the events factually, without dramatics. She explained how Karen had interfered with an active surveillance case, how her public interference had put lives at risk, and how her recklessness could have tipped off a criminal network. She even presented her own evidence, a compilation of Karen's public rants, ring camera footage, and surveillance timestamps that painted a clear picture of escalating obstruction. Jade didn't smile once. She didn't need to. Karen objected no fewer than 16 times during the testimony, none of which were accepted. At one point she slammed her hand on the table and shouted, "This is all theater!" To which the judge replied, without looking up, "Yes, and you're the only one overacting." The courtroom chuckled. Karen turned red. But the real damage was done when the prosecution played footage of Karen's second zip tie incident, including her yelling at the DA agents about mind control frogs and something she called neighborly psyops. That video sealed it. The jury didn't even flinch. The verdict came in after a mercifully short deliberation: guilty on 3 counts of obstruction, 1 count of assaulting a federal agent with a garden tool, and 1 count of unauthorized surveillance. Karen was sentenced to 6 months of probation, 100 hours of community service, mandatory anger management therapy, and a permanent ban from participating in any form of HOA leadership. She tried to appeal on the spot and was promptly escorted out after referring to the judge as a government muppet. Jade didn't celebrate. She didn't gloat. She just walked out of the courtroom, nodded at me, and said, "Let's go home." In her world, wins didn't come with parades. They came with the quiet satisfaction that justice had been served and no one had died along the way. Back in the neighborhood, everything changed and nothing changed. People were more cautious, quieter. There were whispers about the raid, about the bust, about the woman who took down a drug ring while pretending to be on vacation. Jade returned to her usual routines, though now they included more late-night calls and occasional visits from unmarked cars. The Charger stayed parked out front, a silent warning to anyone thinking of stirring up trouble. Karen moved out 3 weeks later. The for sale sign went up the day after her sentencing. No goodbye, no flyers, no rants. Just a quiet packing process, overseen by her cousin and a pair of movers who looked grateful not to have to listen to her. The neighborhood watched from behind curtains, unsure whether to cheer or sigh with relief. I stood on the porch with Jade, sipping coffee, and asked if she felt like it was over. "Not really," she said. "Pieces are still missing. Vega's still out there." The official bust had shut down a major part of the operation, but Santiago Vega, Jade's former informant turned mystery, was still a ghost. His name hadn't come up in the paperwork. No confirmed sightings. Nothing. It gnawed at her, not knowing. Jade didn't believe in loose ends. Loose ends got people killed. A month passed without incident. The landscaping truck stopped. The replacement crew was actually planting flowers instead of hiding evidence. The neighborhood settled back into its predictable routine. Jade started sleeping in a little later. She smiled more. Even hosted a barbecue once, though she never took off her shoulder holster, which made for some awkward conversations during dessert. And then one Saturday afternoon, a new moving truck pulled up in front of Karen's old house. Curious neighbors peeked through blinds, trying to spot red flags. Were the new people normal? Would they water their lawn correctly? Jade and I watched from across the street. A young couple stepped out of the truck. Smiling. Friendly. The woman waved at us. The man carried a small box labeled kitchen stuff and wore a ball cap. Then I saw it. The car. Black. Sleek. Parked behind the truck. The license plate read "Fed for Life." I nudged Jade, who had already gone still. She squinted at the plate, then at the man. Her jaw didn't tighten. She didn't reach for a weapon. She just exhaled and said, "Either he's a friend, or he's one hell of a smart enemy." The man looked up. Made direct eye contact with Jade. Then smiled. Jade smiled back. Not warmly. Not with ease. But with the kind of smile you give someone who understands exactly what game you're playing and knows the stakes better than anyone. The neighborhood may have returned to calm, but the war beneath it never really ended. Because quiet wasn't the same as safe. And some ghosts didn't vanish, they just waited for the right time to come home.